Part 3. My wife of 12 years cheated with my best friend after my accident.
Это самые странные покупки футболистов. Думаешь, что они тратят миллионы только на спорткары и особняки? Некоторые футболисты покупали такую дичь, что у тебя просто взорвется мозг. Начнем с Роналду. Он купил самого дорогого в мире пса. Ему достался редкий щенок за 15 тысяч евро. А Карим Бензема как-то заказал себе золотую ванну. Причем он вообще ей не пользовался. Просто потому, что может себе позволить. А вот Марио Балотери покупал пиццу на 1000 евро и раздавал ее бомжам. Вроде благородно, но за день можно угробить целое состояние. А Неймар, он приобрел вертолет в стиле Бэтмена за 10 миллионов долларов и летает на нем на тренировки. Но даже это не самое странное. Дэвид Бекхэм как-то купил кладбищенский участок. Нет, не для себя, а чтобы никто не строил дома рядом с его особняком. Если бы ты стал миллионером, что бы купил бы первым?
He's apparently been in therapy and part of his amends process was writing to me. The letter was 12 pages long, detailing how the affair began, his shame and regret, and his understanding that he's destroyed our friendship beyond repair. He enclosed a check for $25,000, money he claims Sarah had given him from our joint accounts that I hadn't known about. I verified with my bank, and indeed, there had been additional withdrawals I hadn't discovered. I donated the money to the trauma center that treated me after my accident. I didn't respond to Mike's letter. Some betrayals are simply unforgivable, and while I don't wish him ill, I have no desire to have him in my life in any capacity. The children are adjusting to our new normal. My son seems to be coping better than my daughter, who still has moments of anger and confusion about why her family has changed so dramatically. The therapy is helping, though, and I've noticed improvement in recent weeks. We've established new traditions and routines in our new home, which provides some stability. My own recovery continues to progress. I still have some physical limitations, I probably always will, but I've adapted remarkably well. The emotional recovery has been harder. Trust doesn't come easily to me anymore, and the idea of dating again seems overwhelming, though friends have gently suggested I might be ready to consider it. Last week, Sarah asked to speak with me privately after dropping off the kids. She seemed genuinely remorseful for perhaps the first time, acknowledging the enormity of her betrayal without excuses or justifications. She said therapy has helped her recognize the selfishness of her actions and the pain she's caused. She didn't ask for reconciliation but rather for forgiveness and a more amicable co-parenting relationship moving forward. I told her I appreciated her apology and agreed that working together better for the children was important. As for forgiveness, I said that might come with time, but I couldn't promise. What happened has fundamentally changed how I see her, and while I can move past the anger for our children's sake, forgetting is impossible. So that's where things stand now. I'm a single dad rebuilding my life day by day. The pain hasn't disappeared, but it's no longer all-consuming. I'm focusing on my health, my career, and most importantly, creating a stable, loving home for my children. If there's one thing this experience has taught me, it's the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Even in our darkest moments, there's a way forward if we're brave enough to take it. Final update. It's been a year since my last update, and I wanted to provide some closure to this chapter of my life. So much has changed, mostly for the better. The kids and I have settled comfortably into our new home and routine. They're now 12 and 10, growing and thriving despite the upheaval they've experienced. My daughter still has occasional emotional outbursts, but they're becoming less frequent. My son has become quite protective of his sister and me, sometimes taking on more responsibility than a child his age should, but we're working on that in family therapy. Co-parenting with Sarah has stabilized into a functional, if not friendly, arrangement. We use a co-parenting app to communicate about the children, which helps maintain appropriate boundaries. She has been consistent with visitation and seems genuinely committed to rebuilding her relationship with the kids. According to her sister, Sarah continues with therapy and has made significant progress in understanding the damage her actions caused. I've heard through mutual friends that Mike moved across the country and got remarried to someone much younger. I feel nothing but pity for his new wife, who likely has no idea of his capacity for betrayal. His attempt at amends was his final communication with me, and I prefer to keep it that way. On a personal level, I've experienced tremendous growth. My physical recovery plateaued about 6 months ago, leaving me with a slight limp and occasional pain in my right arm, but nothing that significantly impacts my quality of life. I've advanced in my career, taking on a leadership role at my engineering firm that allows me more flexibility for family responsibilities. Perhaps the biggest change is that I've started dating again. It happened unexpectedly through a parents' volunteer group at the kids' school. Her name is Elaine, she's a widow with a son the same age as mine, and we connected over shared experiences of having our lives upended in ways we never anticipated. We've been seeing each other for about 5 months now, taking things slowly and mindfully, especially considering our children. Elaine knows my full story, and I know hers. There's a level of honesty and communication between us that I never had with Sarah, even before the betrayal. The kids have met each other and get along well, though we've been clear with them that we're just dating and not making any bigger decisions yet. The hardest lesson I've learned through all of this is about forgiveness. Not forgiving Sarah and Mike for their sake, but for my own. Holding on to anger and resentment was keeping me tethered to the trauma. I haven't forgotten what happened, and I never will, but I've chosen to release the daily burden of that betrayal. It no longer defines me or my decisions. Sarah noticed this change in me during a recent parent-teacher conference. Afterward, she commented that I seemed happier, more like my old self. There was a moment of recognition between us, an acknowledgement of what was lost, but also of the possibility that something new and different could be reclaimed. Not our marriage, that's gone forever, but perhaps someday a friendship of sorts for the sake of our children. My accident and the betrayal that followed nearly destroyed me, but they also forced me to rebuild myself from the ground up. In that reconstruction, I discovered strengths I never knew I possessed and clarity about what truly matters. The life I have now isn't the one I planned, but there's beauty and purpose in it that I might never have found otherwise. To anyone facing betrayal by those you trust most, the path forward is neither straight nor easy, but it exists. Some days you'll only manage a single step, and that's okay. Keep moving, keep breathing, keep believing in your own resilience. The wounds may not heal completely, but they will become part of your story rather than its ending. Thank you all for accompanying me on this journey. Your support and advice helped during my darkest moments, and for that, I'll always be grateful. This will be my final update, not because the story is over, but because a new one has begun.
My husband and I divorced 20 years ago because he cheated on me, leaving me stranded with our 2-year-old son and offering to pay for my college as an adultery tax, but now his affair partner wants him to file his good parenting deductions and get me to reimburse them. My ex-husband and I ended things over 20 years ago. When our son was 2, he stepped out. At the time, I was a stay-at-home mom and going to nursing school full-time. He was paying for my schooling. After he left, I asked him if he would keep paying for my school so I could finish with no debt. He agreed, saying it was the least he could do. A few months after that, he got his affair partner pregnant. Once she got pregnant, she demanded he stop paying for my schooling. It was 1/5 of their income, and she said that the money needed to go towards their new baby. He refused and kept paying for the remaining 1.5 years I had left. Over the years I continued my education and now I'm a nurse practitioner. I do well for myself, and I never remarried. On to the problem. My son called me and told me he and his wife are expecting. I was ecstatic. I asked if I could come over sometime during the weekend by and give them some things, his favorite stuffy as a child, a check, and some other small sentimental things. He said yes, so I went over earlier today. I came by and gave him everything, including a check for a few $1,000s. For baby stuff, co-pays, the nursery, or anything else they may want. My son and his wife thanked me and told me the money would be very helpful. My ex-husband and his wife came over a little while later. They surprised them with dinner and didn't know I'd be there, and saw the check on the counter. My ex's wife asked about it and I said, oh well, I wanted to help out where I could, everything's so expensive nowadays. I was really just trying to be polite, but I don't think this is any of her business. This woman had the audacity to say, well, maybe since you have all this money now you can finally pay us back all that money you took when you went to college. I was dumbfounded. My ex has literally never brought up me paying him back. He's always said it was the least he could do for both me and our son. My ex has done very well for himself and his career. I didn't see how or why they'd need the money, so I asked them, do you guys need the money or something? And my ex said no, and she said of course not, it's about principle. I told her I will absolutely not be paying them back for college tuition from over 20 years ago, especially when she ended up in our marital home while I was living in a small apartment barely making ends meet for years after I initially finished school. I've never been bitter or mean, I've always been civil since our kids are siblings, but my blood was boiling. I left shortly after that. According to my son, this has been a point of contention in their marriage. She's brought it up a few times over the years in front of him. And she's insisting to him that he needs to convince me to finally pay back what they're owed. The biggest issue is now that the whole damn family is involved. I got calls from 3 separate family members saying I need to get over myself and just pay it back. So am I the jerk here? Update. So first I want to clarify some things. Yes, it was our marital home, we bought it after getting married. I didn't fight so hard for it in the divorce for a few reasons, mostly that she was borderline harassing me about how they needed the house for their growing family. I also didn't want to deal with a longer and more drawn-out divorce, and it would have been if I fought for the house. Yes, he bought me out of the house, however it really wasn't much as it was late 2007. Most of it went towards credit card debt anyway. Another thing, when he was paying for my schooling we were still legally married. The divorce didn't finalize until after I graduated. There was no child support until after I graduated. There was never any alimony. I did live in the house while I was in school and they lived in an apartment. He paid all those bills including hers after she got pregnant. So his finances were tight at the time. The family that called weren't my relatives. They were my ex's and his wife's relatives. I thought they were family, they've since been blocked. On to the update. I got off work yesterday to find a few missed calls from my son. When I called him back he tells me that his stepmom has now asked for the money from the check since it was almost the same amount they spent on my college. She said it was obvious I'd never pay my debts and that I would just give him, my son, more money anyways. I'm stunned. I'm pissed. I don't know what has possessed her to think to ask my son for money intended for his family. I tell my son to ignore her, and I'll handle it. So next I call my ex. It goes straight to voicemail. I try again a few minutes later, and it's the same thing. So I reluctantly call my ex's wife, and she answers immediately. I tell her the three of us, my ex, her, and me, need to meet first thing in the morning to discuss the debt. In thinking this needs to happen in person with all three of us so there's no confusion. She agrees. This morning we met at a coffee shop near my ex's work. As soon as they sit down I say, "So, ex's wife, want to tell me why you think it's appropriate to ask my son for money?" My ex looks at her and says, "You asked our son for money?" She starts on about how she was only asking for the money they're owed and she didn't ask for more than was on the check. Then she says, "For years we struggled due to paying for your school. For years we couldn't afford a new car, a new house, or a nanny. My kids had to share a room." She goes on about her struggles. I started to tune her out because I keep thinking there's no way she's this deluded. It may have been inappropriate, but I laughed. I literally took out thousands in credit card debt to keep me and my son afloat while my at the time husband was shacking up with her and paying her bills. My ex looks at her and says, "What the hell, ex's wife?" I added, "It's laughable you think you're owed anything from while you were a mistress. We were married when he paid for my schooling. It's quite literally none of your business how he chose to spend money. You had zero entitlement to his money until you said I do, and from what I recall that wasn't until years after the divorce was even finalized. Do not contact me or my son about this money again. You will never see a dime from me." She rolls her eyes and gets up to leave. My ex tells her he's going to stay for a minute. After she's gone he asks why I didn't just call him and tell him about what was going on, said he would have handled it and that it didn't have to go this far. I say I did call him, twice actually, and this is how we figured out she blocked my number from his phone. So those of you who said she's just very insecure, you were absolutely correct. I tell him that she involved his sister, cousin, and his sister-in-law. That I got several calls and texts from them telling me I should just pay back my debt finally. I tell him that she involved the family and then asked our son for money intended for his baby. She's crossed too many lines. He apologizes and says he'll make sure she doesn't bother me about it again. We both leave after that. My son told me he blocked her number and doesn't want her at his house until she apologizes. That's pretty much it for now.